It's day 6 of President Trump's Senate impeachment trial. The president's legal team continued making their case in his defense, but reports about a book by the former national security advisor are sparking even more questions over whether or not to call witnesses.
Senators gathered once again on Capitol Hill to continue hearing opening arguments from President Trump's legal team.
That the president was at all time acting under his constitutional authority, under his legal authority, in our national interest, and pursuant to his oath of office.
But a New York Times report has thrown a wrench into the proceedings. The newspaper claimed that in a draft of his upcoming book, former National Security Advisor John Bolton accused Trump of quid pro quo. In the draft, Bolton wrote that Trump wanted to continue withholding military aid to Ukraine until the country helped with investigations into Joe Biden. The report cites multiple sources, but has not been independently verified by NTD. In response, a lawyer for White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney pushed back against the reports. He said that Bolton never informed Mulvaney of any concerns surrounding Bolton's alleged talk with Trump. Democrats are now using the claim to further their demands for witness testimony in the trial.
They cannot dispute the relevance and the importance of John Bolton's testimony.
A handful of Republicans appear open to hearing from Bolton.
Do you want to hear from John Bolton at all? As in this report?
I don't think we need to, but that's just, I'm going to listen to the rest of the case and make that decision.
But others remain opposed to the idea.
Cut to the chase, it really doesn't change anything in terms of the process.
The president also commented on the development.
I can tell you nothing was ever said to John Bolton, but I have not seen a manuscript. I guess he's writing a book. I have not seen it.
Details of Bolton's book were leaked to several news outlets on Sunday evening.
And in a 5-4 vote today, the Supreme Court has allowed new green card rules. These rules would essentially raise the bar for future applicants.
New rules will make it harder for immigrants who are likely to depend on welfare to get a green card. Federal judges initially blocked the Trump administration from implementing the new standard, but a 5-4 Supreme Court vote has given the green light. An immigrant receiving Medicaid, food stamps, or other public services for more than 12 months will now qualify as a public charge under the new rule. For this, the applicant's green card could be denied.
Through the public charge rule, President Trump's administration is reinforcing the ideals of self-sufficiency and personal responsibility, ensuring that immigrants are able to support themselves and become successful here in America.
Critics of the rule, however, say it would stop poorer applicants who need those services from obtaining permanent residency. There would also be some exceptions to the rule, such as military personnel, pregnant women, and immigrants under the age of 21.
And crowds of fans gathered outside the Staples Center in LA to pay tribute to Kobe Bryant. The NBA legend died yesterday in a helicopter crash in foggy conditions about 40 miles northwest of central LA.
Fans of the late Los Angeles Lakers star Kobe Bryant were drawn together on Sunday. Bryant died earlier that day when the helicopter he was traveling in crashed into a hillside near LA. His 13-year-old daughter and 7 others were also killed in the accident. Emotions were running high outside the Staples Center, the home of the Los Angeles Lakers. A 17-year-old fan felt the need to come to pay tribute to the star that inspired him to play basketball.
I started watching Kobe when I was probably 7 years old or 6, and he inspired me to pick up a basketball and play the game. So I've been watching him ever since, and I really felt the need to come here.
His mother broke the news to him. She said she knew it was going to have a significant impact.
And he just broke into tears, and so just thought that we could pay him some respect by coming down here, being part of the community. We knew that there would be an outpour because he's just so loved.
The crowd of fans gathered together, paying homage to the NBA legend. They spoke of heartbreak at the loss of the 41-year-old star. This fan said he would not be forgotten.
Kobe will forever live in my life and will forever be LA, the king of LA.
Bryant retired from basketball in 2016. When the crash took place, he was flying to Thousand Oaks, California to coach his daughter's basketball team. The investigation into the cause of the accident is ongoing.
Senators Bernie Sanders, Amy Klobuchar, and Elizabeth Warren used time off from the impeachment hearings to continue their bid for presidency. They joined other hopefuls in Iowa ahead of the state's all-important Democratic caucus.
Democratic presidential candidates are busy campaigning ahead of the Iowa caucus next Monday. It's a significant day. Iowa has a strong record of backing the final Democratic nominee. In fact, they've got it right the last 5 times.
The outcome of the Iowa caucus does influence the assessment of voters around the country.
Almost 2,000 delegates are needed to secure the nomination. Iowa only has 41, small compared to states like Texas or California. But it holds influence by being the first state to vote. Usually a field of candidates narrows to the top 3 or 4 after the state's caucus.
We have the upper hand in this as far as getting it kicked out. I mean, I have relatives in other states who haven't kept track of anybody.
Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, and Elizabeth Warren are polling well, but with the results of each poll differing significantly, it's still anybody's contest.
I think it's really neat, that they're coming around telling us their points of views and stuff.
Iowa has a unique but complicated method for choosing their nominee. Voters will meet at 1,600 locations around the state. Some will meet in schools, gymnasiums, or even private living rooms. They don't use paper ballots to vote. Instead, attendees will choose the preferred candidate by standing in a particular area of a room.
In this age of cynicism and disconnection from politics, there's still some place where that person-to-person interaction takes place. And it's right here. It's a weird, wonderful little world here in Iowa.
In a Taliban-held area in central Afghanistan this morning.
A spokesman for
the Taliban has since claimed responsibility for bringing it down.
A spokesman for U.S. forces in Afghanistan said the military plane, a Bombardier E-11A, crashed in the Ghazni province near central Afghanistan, and that an investigation into the cause is ongoing. He added there were no indications so far the plane was brought down by enemy fire. Taliban social media accounts have posted unverified footage purportedly from the crash site showing what could be the remains of a U.S. Bombardier E-11A aircraft. Afghan authorities said the plane crashed due to technical issues and that officers were heading to locate and identify the wreckage.
Afghan police, army, and commandos are tasked to go to the area and assess the situation.
He added the area's mountainous terrain has made it challenging to communicate. Following the crash, rumors abounded that it was a state-owned Ariana Afghan airline plane that went down. The CEO was quick to squash those claims.
Based on our information, there wasn't any crash or emergency landing by Ariana Airlines planes.
The Taliban, meanwhile, said in a statement the Taliban had shot down a U.S. military plane in Ghazni. The spokesman said the crew on board included high-ranking U.S. officials. Amid the conflicting reports, the U.S. Defense Secretary said he is monitoring the situation.
We're the situation. I have nothing further to report at this time. As the matter develops and we develop it, we will update the media.
The Bombardier E-11A is a U.S. Air Force electronic surveillance plane.
Amid fears over China's new virus outbreak, officials now admit that some patients can still transmit the illness, even if they don't show symptoms. A public health analyst says it will be extremely dangerous.
The walking source of infection, this might be the real threat to the globe as China's deadly virus outbreak continues to escalate. China's National Health Commission warned on Sunday that many patients of the new contagious coronavirus do not have symptoms or only mild ones. An expert says this will make the epidemic extremely difficult to control. There's no treatment for SARS or the new virus. Public health analyst Laurie Garrett says that China's only solution for the SARS epidemic 18 years ago was to isolate all potential patients who are detectable because of their fever symptoms. But this time, it may not work, nor will the fever checking measures taken by other countries, including the U.S., to prevent infected patients from coming in.
If the fever is just one stage of the infection, but people are capable of transmitting to others before they have a fever, then a lot of these measures are kind of false assurances. We're deluding ourselves into believing that we're stopping the epidemic by taking people's temperatures.
She said because of the Chinese regime's cover-up and inaction, the best time of disease control has already passed. Now the virus is spreading globally.
I think we're in an incredibly dangerous place right now because we don't know enough about the virus yet to make absolutely certain decisions about what actions to take.
China has now put tens of millions of people under lockdown. The effectiveness of the strategy is questioned since 5 million fled the area the night before the lockdown. Reporting by Penny Zhou, NTD News.
With 3 confirmed cases and several others suspected, France is the first European country touched by the Chinese outbreak. French health authorities have prepared the first public measure to quell the outbreak. Our France correspondent David Vives has the details.
At France's largest international airport, Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, attention is increasing for travelers coming from China. France put in place medical screenings and a reception medical team on Sunday to identify travelers who present symptoms of the coronavirus infection. But the task is not easy, as a person suffering from the coronavirus might not present any symptoms.
I feel like there's a lot of anxiety about what the virus is exactly. When we were in Beijing for our layover flight, they were monitoring body temperatures for all children, but we weren't monitored. We didn't have to wear masks, things like that. All went well, but I feel like people are worried.
People are responding in different ways.
At
first, I didn't want to wear a mask, but I was pretty much forced to, and they convinced me to as a precaution. But then I think we're pretty safe in Europe.
And for the 800 French nationals still remaining in Wuhan, Health Minister Agnès Buzyn said they could be repatriated next week. 3 cases of patients suffering from the virus have been confirmed so far, but the updates about them are good.
The 3 people are doing very well. Clinicians are following up on them regularly and have been giving us updates. We are very reassured by the developments.
Buzyn also said a dozen other cases are currently being tested, and that new cases of confirmed patients are likely.
Health authorities have reassured the public that a comprehensive plan is in place. Specialized medical personnel are on hand for anyone who fears they may have contracted the virus.
The main issue is the question of how much the virus could spread, as more than 100 flights arrive from China every day to France's 12 airports.
Here in Paris, Chinatown, the locals weren't in the mood to celebrate over the weekend. The New Year's parade cancelled by the organizers. David Vives, NTD News.
Coming up after the break, the UK is to decide whether to say no way to Huawei. Will it follow the footsteps of the US?
Every once in a while, something comes along so masterful, it leaves you in awe. So inspiring, it changes your life. So beautiful, you wish it would never end. When that happens, it's something not to be missed. Shen Yun, an all-new production every year.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people. I'm a little freaked out that that many people have seen my face. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
In what the Secretary of State calls a momentous decision, the UK will soon announce whether it will ban equipment from the Chinese telecoms giant Huawei in its 5G networks. Jane Worrell reports from London.
The UK is expected to decide whether it will ban Huawei from its 5G networks tomorrow. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he'll find a way to balance technology and security.
Allow consumers, businesses, in the UK to have access to fantastic technology, fantastic communications, but also protect our security interests.
But US intelligence agencies are worried, fearing Huawei could open a backdoor to Chinese espionage. Huawei's links with the Chinese Communist Party are well documented. Several members of Johnson's government are very cautious about Huawei.
I hope the Minister will see the concern that this whole House feels towards Huawei, and the idea that we should be nesting that dragon, the idea that we should be allowing the fox into the hen house, when really we should be guarding the wire.
But some reports are speculating that the UK may allow Huawei into the periphery of its networks only, which would be a contrast to the United States and Australia. The US has been in talks with the UK and its allies to completely ban the technology giant from their mobile networks, saying it could otherwise compromise their intelligence sharing relationship.
We're in active discussions with the UK government and others about Huawei.
Some UK intelligence experts say they can manage the risks, although concerns over Huawei are not just limited to national security.
Huawei is complicit with the human rights violations that are taking place in China.
Last November, an Australian think tank revealed that Huawei is providing technology to Chinese authorities that is enabling the persecution of Uyghur Muslims.
We should be thinking as a country not only of financial and economic cost, but of the cost both to our relationships with our allies, our reputation in the world, and indeed our own freedoms and values.
Pompeo is due to meet Boris Johnson on a visit to London this week, after the UK is expected to have announced its decision on Huawei. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
World leaders joined Holocaust survivors today for a candlelight vigil in Auschwitz to mark the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi German death camp.
Leaders and survivors walked along the rail tracks in the camp before placing candles at the monument to the victims of fascism. More than a dozen heads of state, including German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier and Israeli President Reuven Rivlin, took part on Monday in ceremonies at the Gate of Death, where rail tracks led trains packed with victims into the camp. The commemorations took place as Poland seeks to highlight its own suffering during World War II, in which 6 million Poles, including 3 million Polish Jews, were killed, and Warsaw was razed to the ground. For many non-Jewish Poles, Auschwitz remains the place where the Nazis jailed and killed Polish resistance fighters, the intelligentsia, Roman Catholic priests, and innocent civilians. More than 1.1 million people, most of them Jews, perished in the camp's gas chambers or from starvation, cold, and disease.
Up next, police identify suspects with facial recognition using an app called Clearview, which takes photos off public social media accounts. Police say it's effective, but a privacy expert cautions against it when we return.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Law enforcement across the country has access to an app that can tell people's names and possibly where they live just from a picture. The app uses social media pictures to build its database. Reporter Kevin Hogan has the details.
A facial recognition app called Clearview has been marketed to law enforcement agencies to help them quickly identify suspects. A privacy and security researcher from Columbia University explains how it works.
You take a picture, feed it into that app, and now you know their name and maybe where they live and who their friends are. It's a stalker's dream.
The app fills its database with pictures taken from the open web.
You go to a party, somebody else takes a picture and puts it up on Instagram, Facebook, what have you. They can scrape it, and there's your name.
Usually, police will compare footage from security cameras to a database of legally possessed arrest photos to identify a suspect. But Clearview goes beyond that and uses people's social media photos.
Facebook pictures, Instagram pictures are not compiled for the purpose of helping police officers or helping stalkers.
Clearview says the app can help identify child molesters, murderers, and suspected terrorists. Police have praised the technology's effectiveness. But Bellevin says it is better to accept an increase in unsolved crimes so as to protect our privacy from an overbearing police force.
We are not going to let law enforcement have unbridled power. We are going to put restrictions on them. This is a conscious trade-off we are making.
Some people have expressed concerns over whether the technology should be allowed.
This isn't China. Like, they have no right to be doing that and stuff like that. Like, we have a right to privacy.
Work hard, I mind my own business. I don't like people knowing my business.
I mean, I still don't think that gives them the right to release your pictures to the police and then they can track it back to you.
The expert says the decision as to whether or not police can use this technology shouldn't be between a private company and a police commissioner. He says new laws should be passed directly addressing this issue. Reporting from New York, Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
And on Friday, New Jersey's Attorney General banned the Clearview app from being used by police department. Up next, sled racers gather on the Czech Republic's highest mountain for the country's annual snow sled competition. More on what it meant historically after the break.
Are you tired of newspapers spinning the truth and pushing false narratives? And are you looking for honest coverage of Spygate, the true story of collusion? Or the truth behind the crisis at our southern border? Or how the Chinese Communist Party is working to subvert America and our way of life? Then you need to check out the Epoch Times newspaper. It's independent, nonpartisan, and it doesn't push any political agendas. Just go to readepoch.com and try it yourself for a full month for just $1. You'll absolutely love it.
Sled racers glided down the snowy hillsides of the Czech Republic's tallest mountains on Saturday to take part in an annual horn sled competition.
On the Czech Republic's Krkonos mountain range, sledge racers gathered to take part in the yearly competition. Teams of two rode on horn sledges known as rohacky downhill, with hopes of crossing the finish line with the fastest time.
The rohacky sledges were used for gathering hay and wood from the mountains. They were simply a working tool. Later on, we started to use them for tourist rides.
Many dressed up in traditional costumes. Each team carried a bag of hay, since the sledges were historically used by woodcutters to collect wood and hay from the mountains.
The woodcutters had to ride down the hill with 7 meters of wood on these sledges. Some of them also didn't survive when they didn't manage to brake correctly.
The extra load also assisted teams when braking.
The racetrack goes in a straight line, and as a part of the race, we put bags of hay on the middle of the sledge of it to make it go slower.
Maneuvering the sledges is harder than it might look. According to one racer, turning is very hard.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
My